Well, hello, this is my Aviation 435 presentation. Uh, Picked this CRJ 200 right here because it is a Mesa CRJ. I just happened upon it when I was looking for a picture to put on this slide. I looked up the tail number. I don't think I ever flew it myself. I didn't see it in my logbook. I thumbed through that, but nonetheless, I thought that was kind of neat. CRJ 200, since that's what we were discussing in the class, and lo and behold, there's a Mesa CRJ. So I'll jump right into the presentation. I chose the autoflight system, and really specifically the different modes in the autoflight. That's a broad topic, and it would take a lot longer than the length of this presentation to go into it. So for that reason, I might move through it at a little bit of a clip. But here's kind of the overview of what the presentation is going to contain. Just a brief summary of the autoflight, the flight director and the autopilot, how they're coupled and they work together, the different horizontal modes, and the different vertical modes of the autoflight. Little tie it together at the end, and then of course slide with my sources. So I'm not going to just sit here and read the slides to you. I hate death by PowerPoint. It drives me nuts when people do that. I'm sure anybody watching this presentation is capable of reading. So I picked the autoflight system, and specifically the modes, for a couple of reasons. As pilots, we all fly in love with every aircraft that we fly, but the CRJ really is a special aircraft to me. I got done with flight school. I went to work for Mesa. That's the first foray into commercial aviation, and going to ground school, learning the aircraft, getting typed, flying the line. But not only that, I went from steam gauges and no automation to PFD, MFD, FMS setup with all kinds of engineering logic, all kinds of automation, and all sorts of things that reduce workload in the cockpit. Absolutely fantastic. So here's just a brief overview of the AFCS. The flight director, and this slide and the next slide here I'll jump to in just a second, and how they're coupled together. And you don't have to have the autopilot on to have flight director command bars, but the autopilot's going to use the flight director to do all of the neat stuff that's listed here, all of the stuff that you can get it to do for you. And they really wanted to see that, as I recall, in ground school. They said don't just kick the autopilot off and try to hand fly, because you're trying to avoid using the automation. It's really a great tool, and you want to be able to manipulate the aircraft to do what you want it to do. So here's a neat chart that I found that kind of breaks down the different modes. And since I have this nice picture here, I'll just say, for all the slides from here on out, we'll say the green lights here on either side mean it's engaged. The green light on the left-hand side is computer 1, and the light on the right-hand side is flight control computer 2. So captain side, first officer side, obviously. So here's some different lateral modes of operation for the aircraft. And the first one is roll mode. So roll and pitch are kind of the modes the aircraft will be in if you don't give it any other guidance. If it doesn't know what to do, it's just going to default to roll and pitch. I remember going into the sim and the instructor telling us you do not want to be in roll and pitch. If you are in roll and pitch and you don't realize it and you stay that way, you are not in control of the aircraft. Roll and pitch is the aircraft saying, you haven't told me what to do, so I'm just going to do the last thing that you told me to do. So in the case of roll mode, whatever heading or bank angle you were at, it's just going to maintain that. You want to get out of that mode and get into a positive control mode. All right, so we have takeoff mode. If you're on the ground, you hit that toga button on the side of the thrust levers. If you got the weight on wheels, it's going to give you wings level. Once you leave the ground, whatever heading you were at when you left the ground, it's going to direct you to stay there. So runway heading, basically. All right, we got heading mode. So heading mode's pretty simple. You hit the heading button here. You'll have the knob. You can drive that heading bug around the compass, or you can hit the button in the center of the knob, and that'll snap the bug right to the center of wherever you're at. So if ATC tells you fly present heading, you just hit that button in the center of the knob. It'll snap that bug around, and you're flying present heading as long as you're in heading mode. That's pretty neat. You get the little heading right there. Alright, nav mode will enable you to track a radial using a specific nav aid. You can see in this case they've got localizer dialed in. So you have the nav mode here, course knobs on either side. You got captain side, first officer side. dial it for the course that you want, hit the button in the middle if you want to go direct to the station, and that'll arm it over here. So in this case it's a localizer. You can see the localizer is armed. So that mode is armed, this mode is active, and you have this barrier here dividing them, and it'll do what we call jumping the fence. So you're in heading mode here. When you're intercepting that localizer, it's going to capture and track that radial. It's going to jump the fence. It's going to go from white over here to green and take the place of that heading. Approach mode functions pretty similar way, except that it is much more sensitive, and it'll give you vertical and horizontal guidance both. So localizer and glide slope both, basically, if you're going to be flying an ILS. And there's your approach mode button, and same thing, you got your course here and here, your course knobs to dial in your course, and hitting the button in the middle will take you direct to the station. Back course mode is just like it sounds. So if you're going to fly a localizer back course, you know, those are always fun with reverse sensing and such. So you'll hit the back course button here, and it'll function much the same way. It'll get armed here, and then when you intercept, you'll jump the fence and become active, and then you get your two knobs to select there. Half bank mode will reduce your bank limit from 30 degrees to 15 degrees, half, if you can imagine that. So here's your half bank button here. You can manually select it, which, as I recall, there are a few emergency procedures, engine failure after takeoff kind of thing. Also, when you're going through 31.6 climbing, it'll automatically engage, and when you're descending through 31.6, it'll automatically disengage, and you get this little half bank right there. Go around mode. When you are in flight, you're on an approach, you hit that toga button on either side of the thrust lever. We'll use our imagination here. Instead of takeoff, takeoff, it'll say go around, go around. And this is another, where there's a vertical and a horizontal component to it. When you hit that button, you know, both modes, vertical and horizontal, are going to go into go around mode if you're on an approach. But in the case of horizontal, when you hit that, it's going to give you wings level. We'll talk about the vertical here in just a minute, but that's going to give you 15 degrees pitch up. So wings level, 15 degrees of deck angle, that's what you want if you're going to go around. It's real basic, right? So here's our chart again, our different modes. And now we'll step into vertical. And again, I'm moving at a pretty good clip here, I know, but I don't want to run over my time, and there's a lot of information here. So pitch is what goes hand in hand with roll. In the case of pitch, whatever pitch it's at when you enter that, it's going to stay there. So same thing. You don't want to be in roll and pitch because those are the default. You're not in positive control of the aircraft. The aircraft is just doing what you told it to do last, basically. So we want to transition out of these modes if we find ourselves in them. So altitude pre-select. So you got your altitude knob here. You can set an altitude that you want to leave the altitude that you're at and move to that altitude. So you dial in your altitude here, and you hit your altitude button, and you are able to capture and track that altitude. So there's a breakdown here. You know, I don't have time in a 10-minute presentation to kind of go into all of it. It's pretty neat, but it's a little involved. So this side and the next slide, you'll see you set that. You have a vertical mode to get to that altitude, be it speed mode, vertical speed, whatever. It'll capture that altitude and it'll hold it until you dial in a new altitude and then move to that one. And there's a little bit of a breakdown here, also hand in hand with the previous slide about how all of that works. Again, I'm moving at a good clip here to try to get this all in. The information's in the slide, and like I said, I'm not going to try to read it to you. So speed mode's pretty neat. It'll cause the aircraft to climb at whatever speed you select. So you hit the speed button, you put your speed in with your knob here, and that's really useful if you want to climb at, well, just like we have 300 knots on the bug here, but for example, if you want to climb at 300 knots, you know, the aircraft will adjust the pitch. There's no auto throttles, but adjust the pitch so that it'll climb to what you have selected, which is pretty neat. And then kind of hand in hand with that, the counterpart to that is vertical speed mode. So instead of climbing it at a specific airspeed or Mach number, you're going to climb at a vertical speed. So you hit the vertical speed button and you use your wheel here. Each click is 100 foot per minute. You can see here vertical speed descending 1500 foot per minute. Obviously there's applications for both, when the right tool would be either speed mode or vertical speed mode. Glide slope mode, just like it says, will capture the glide slope. You can see here the diamonds coming in. They're intercepting it from the bottom. They're getting ready to capture that glide slope and ride it down. Alright, go around mode. This is just like the vertical component that we talked about, or the horizontal rather. This is the vertical component of it. So when you hit that toga button, you're going to get wings level in the flight director and 15 degrees pitch up. And again, we'll use our imaginations. Instead of take off, we'll imagine it said go around, go around. So there's a quick review, overview of the auto flight, the flight director, different horizontal modes, different vertical modes. I'll give the conclusion here in just a second, and then my reference slide. So the conclusion is, and my picture of Homer, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan. I sneak that into every presentation I can. But the automation on the CRJ is just absolutely fantastic. I won't try to say much more than that. I ran over my time a little bit. All these modes really, it seems so complicated when you're trying to learn them, but then once you understand how to make the automation work for you, you understand how to control the aircraft, it's just phenomenal. You can make the aircraft do what you want it to do with little effort and reduce cockpit workload so much. When you are familiar with it, it is absolutely your best friend. So that's about all I have. There's my reference slide at the very end. So thank you very much for watching, and God bless.